Good morning, good morning, America. Today, I'm planning to upload two videos. This is the first one, but I have a very important message. This is the most important message that I've made in a while and possibly ever. Let's get serious. Let's talk politics. I want to talk as a real black conservative, a lifelong black conservative. And I'm going to start by telling sort of a story time. Why am I a black conservative? In my whole life, I wished that someday I could become a Republican, but I couldn't. And I think I can explain it pretty quickly. I was born and raised in Chicago, South Side. My mother was a foster child. My biological father was an orphan that I never met. I did track him down and talk to him one time on the phone. And I never idolized my father. I never didn't trust my mom made the right decision by not fighting hard to see that I had a relationship with my biological father. My biological father should not have been in my life. My mom made the right decision. They both made that decision. And I didn't miss my father. I had good stepfathers. It's one reason that I really don't like the red pill and how they tell men not to ever date single mothers. And they call stepfathers simps. I don't appreciate that. I had flawed stepfathers, some very flawed, but I also had, even with flaws and all, it was good that they were in my life. Everything in life is a gift and a curse. And I know I don't speak very clearly. Go ahead and use the caption, closed caption, if you have a hard time understanding my language. I'll try my best to articulate, but I do have a lot of issues when it comes to speaking. But like I say, this is very important. This is to black conservatives, this is to black Republicans, and Republicans in general, conservatives in general, who are MAGA. Many Republicans, many prominent Republicans have been against Donald Trump from day one. Me, not so much. I decided to give Donald Trump a chance. I knew he was going to be trouble. Let's go back all those years ago when it was Trump versus Hillary. Most of us thought Trump had no chance of winning. That's one reason that a lot of the trollish type people, I don't know why I did that in quotes, but I'm thinking about people who became MAGA, or they just laughed at Donald Trump as if it was a joke. This is not a joke. The presidency of the United States of America is not a joke. The people who do like MAGA, because as a person who's been a conservative my entire life, my circle is conservative. Most people I know are conservative and tend to be on the religious conservative side of the game. And I've seen religious conservatives, a lot of black religious conservatives, either minimize Trump, or it's a lot of black conservatives that say vote ain't even our thing anyway. We shouldn't vote. That's none of our business. You know, we believe in God, and whatever God believes, whatever is meant to happen is going to happen. I'm a Messianic Jew, and there are lots of different type of Messianic Jews, but I'm in a Messianic Judaism that's really close to Judaism. It's probably closer to Judaism than it is to Christianity, except we do look at the Son of Man. I'm really hungry, so I will probably be eating some of my meal while it's hot. Um, and I hope this is the book where I have the notes. I made notes in one of my notebooks. I haven't made a scripted YouTube video in many years. And I gave up on YouTube many years ago because I discovered probably back in 2008 what it would take to really succeed in the algorithm game. And what I found and what I discovered is that you got to be pretty deceptive. You have to use consumer psychology. And when we use some consumer psychology, it's very deceptive, especially when you think of modern day marketing in America. And this looks like this isn't the notebook that I was hoping I had. So I'm going to be going off of the top of the dome, freestyle in this video. I had a list of arguments for why no conservative or no Republican, especially a Republican that loves the Republican Party, when we hear those letters, GOP, that's something to really think about. If you're a Republican, the GOP doesn't exist anymore. Donald Trump and MAGA have killed the grand old party of Lincoln and Grant. GOP, that's what those letters stand for. They stand for the grand old party, the party that was founded to end slavery. A party, they couldn't beat the Democrats by themselves, the Whigs and the Quakers and the many other political parties that were anti-slavery, that were abolitionists. They couldn't beat the Democrats. So they conspired to pull all these parties together and come up with the Republican Party. Abraham Lincoln was the first nominee of this party, the greatest president that possibly the world has ever seen. When I was a kid, Abraham Lincoln wasn't just respected by Republicans. Hell, it's not respected by Republicans anymore. Look at some of the things that look at all of the things Donald Trump has said about Abraham Lincoln since he's gotten into politics. If he brings up Lincoln, it's only to pat himself on the back and say that I'm just as great or the second best to Lincoln. That's the most respect he'll give Lincoln. He often says that he's better than Lincoln, the best president ever. It's so disrespectful to Abraham Lincoln. It's so disrespectful to every Republican that fought under the Union Party, under Lincoln, that died in the Civil War. It's disrespectful of Donald Trump to compare himself to Abraham Lincoln. It's disrespectful for any modern day human to compare themselves to Abraham Lincoln, in my opinion. And then you look at the next Republican president, Ulysses S. Grant. When Trump said the other day that he was the second greatest president and he's done more for black people than any president since Abraham Lincoln, I found that very offensive, blasphemous. Do you know how many presidents there have been since Lincoln? How many things that we've struggled together as a nation since Lincoln? Ulysses S. Grant, the general over the United States Army, who became president after Abraham Lincoln got assassinated. If not for Grant, there would be no Lincoln. And Grant fought that fight many more years. It drove him crazy, drove him to drinking, drove him to depression. The Civil War is not a joke. The sacrifices of Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant and many Republican presidents after them. The Republican Party didn't go sour. I might have to do more research, but it looks from my research, it didn't go sour until it went sour before Nixon, but we haven't had a good Republican since Nixon. They were all bad. Nixon was bad. Reagan was bad. These MAGA people, they love talking about conspiracies. They don't talk about the conspiracy that was proven true. The Iran-Contra scandal. The CIA was pushing crack coast to coast, and we know this. People who've gone to prison. Oliver North testified to this back then. Rick Ross is running around. Not the rapper, but the real Rick Ross is running around telling his story. Talking about the Sandinistas and Iran-Contras and what he knows about this situation. This is serious, man. And I will post a video later. I plan on reacting to a video that I was just watching now. And this is mental health experts pleading once again to the American public. This is not a joke. Donald Trump is not a sane man. And I'm talking to MAGA with love. I really am. The election has not happened yet. Don't re-elect this man. One thing I want to talk about while it's fresh on my mind, because I didn't take notes when I was really thinking about this and I was watching that special about that was from the psychologists and psychiatrists. J.D. Vance is Donald Trump's vice president. People minimize there was a mob at the Capitol with masks, Confederate flags, and guns who constructed a gallows on the Washington lawn, on the lawn at the Capitol. And they were screaming, "Hang Mike Pence," and they were going through the building searching for Mike Pence. I think most of the people in that building, they didn't know how serious it was. They were kind of just mob mentality, temporary insanity. Most of them just got caught up. But there were some people in that building that were real life conspirators, and they wanted to find Mike Pence and kill him. It's not a joke. It's not a game. I didn't vote in the election when it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump because it really was like the South Park episode. My whole life I've heard that. You got to pick between the worst of two evils. And that language will pick up towards when we get close to the election yet again. And they say the same things yet again. Kamala Harris is now the candidate, and it's going to be really hard. I'm telling myself, I decided a long time ago I was going to vote against Trump. January 6th was not a joke. That's the closest thing to September 11th that we've had, and people are laughing it off. January 6th was not a joke, and so many people laugh about that. People died. And many more have gone to jail and prison, and Mike Pence, so many people want to minimize that. But let's say at least it was 50-50 chance that mob would have killed him if they found him. The vice president of the United States was almost murdered by a mob 4 years ago. And we don't talk about that. What happened to Republicans? And for Republicans, not only was the vice president almost killed, a Republican, a loyal, long-time Republican, was almost murdered in the name of Republicans. This is real. And I am serious because this is serious and nobody's taking it serious. I mean, a lot of people are taking it serious, but so many people. I like Trump. He's funny. We don't need an entertainer. We don't need a politician giving interviews once a week. The president doesn't need to focus on making the media happy or entertaining people. Look at what's going on in the entire world. Look at the big picture. We often talk about the movie Idiocracy, but this isn't bigger than this. This is not a comedian. This is not a comedic movie. Donald Trump will be 80 soon. Him having Vance in there, who called the man our Hitler. And it's true. Donald Trump is the closest we've ever come to Hitler. Minimize it however you want to minimize it. But Donald Trump, maybe you can argue like a Robert E. Lee or something. But not really. Robert E. Lee was fighting to keep what they had. Donald Trump, who knows what's in this man's mind? They talk about how honest he is. This man lies more than any public figure. Who has lied? Who has been just recently? His speech had more people. And not just his speech, they're not even saying what speech. That January 6th speech was bigger than the I Have a Dream speech. The I Have a Dream speech, that is a sentence. You could look that up on Google or talk to your smartphone and say, what is the I Have a Dream speech? That was a moment in time. Trump is not Martin Luther King, and he shouldn't be compared to him. He shouldn't be compared to Abraham Lincoln. He shouldn't be walking around saying that he was better than Ulysses S. Grant. He shouldn't say that he's better than Ulysses S. Grant, and Republicans run with that. Black people run that. He's done more for black people than Ulysses S. Grant. Google that man. Look at his Wikipedia page. That is insanity. To say that Donald Trump did more for black people than General Grant? That's beyond stupidity. That's borderline insanity. I'll give it to stupidity because American people, we are stupid. We are uneducated. We don't know about history like we should. It's ridiculous that Trump could get away with saying that and not everybody go, hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant, I believe that was the 17th and 18th president. So he's done more for black people than most presidents. There are slave owner presidents that have done more for black people than Trump or a lot of people. I don't like Thomas Jefferson like that because of me and the way I feel and my thoughts and everything. I do look at Thomas Jefferson more. I went to Thomas Jefferson High School, and I look at him more as a colonizer and an oppressor than most people look at Donald Trump as blah, 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 freedom. It's hard for me to look at him like that. But being objective, some of the things that he did, of course they help black people more than anything that Trump will ever do. Even George Washington, the fact that America is America, we have lost our minds. So many people are so ideological and they're stuck in these ideologies that they don't even fully understand. I'm as pro-black as anybody, but listening to some of these pro-black militants who are bashing Kamala Harris because whatever about weed or whatever about some of her prosecutors' false convictions and all this stuff, that's nothing compared to the decades of Trump, his accusations, his lawsuits. He tried to get boys executed, high school boys who were just walking home from school. He tried to get them executed for a rape they did not commit. Logically speaking, they didn't commit that rape. Teenage boys don't do that. What happened to that woman? Teenage boys don't chase down a jogger and almost, I'm not even going to describe what happened in that case because it's insanity to suggest that high school boys between the ages, I believe, is 14, maybe 12, but the oldest boy was 16. The Central Park Five. They did over 30 years and Donald Trump tried to get them executed. Donald Trump has many times said he wants to execute drug dealers. How many cases do we know? Dozens and dozens, hundreds, thousands of cases of cops getting caught planting drugs on people. Donald Trump wants the cops to be heavier handed when it comes to people that he look guilty. But with him, the justice system is corrupt and unfair, and this man had a fair trial. Donald Trump should have been convicted a long time ago. And now the Republican Party is they're apologists and they're making excuses for what Donald Trump just got convicted of. Hush money to a porn star, finance money, like all the things he was accused for. You got Republicans who are supposed to be the crime and, the Justice Party. All about justice, minimizing that. And you call yourself a conservative and you're fighting for a man who cheated on his wife with a porn star, paid her off, and cooked the books with the taxes? How is that the conservative position? How are these conservatives, again, I didn't tell the story. I didn't tell the story of why I wanted to be a Republican as a young man. Well, one, my ancestors fought in those wars, the Civil War. I'm a direct descendant of Hiram Revel Rhodes, the first chaplain, the first black chaplain in United States military history, fought in the Civil War. The first black senator in United States history. I got to pause this for a second. All right. So I had to get some food in my stomach. I'm getting all energetic and everything. But this is very important. This is very important. Now to the story time. Why was I so infatuated with the Republican Party? So I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I was born and raised in Chicago, extreme poverty, born in Michael Reese Hospital, the hospital that's now shut down, the hospital right there by the Robert Taylor Projects. Well, it was closer to downtown, but that was the low-end hospital for little baby black boys. Born in my situation with my circumstances. And I went to my first school, I went to my mom worked. Usually my mom worked a lot. And I went to some really good daycares. I don't know if I think I might have just mentioned it, but I'm on a spectrum, autism, special education, all that type of stuff. But I was very precocious. I was reading early. I was talking early. I was walking early, daycare, reading. When I was born, I was gifted with one of those Jehovah's Witness children's Bibles with the gold cover. And I read that a lot, flipped through it a lot. It's a very special book to me. And I was the type, I got in a lot of trouble for behavior disorder. I was considered, back in those days, they called it behavior disorder. I had a behavior disorder and I was in a behavior disability class. Um, Special education and special counseling. I went to the first public school I went to once I first started going to kindergarten was a great magnet school, Stone Scholastic Academy. And since I was a special needs child, I got a lot of special attention. I got therapy. I talked to an actual psychiatrist as a 4-year old, 5-year old, 6-year old. I seen a lot of traumatic stuff as a kid, a lot of traumatic stuff. Things that now that I've left Chicago and I've traveled this country, I understand. As black people, we think we can all understand each other. We think we can all relate to each other. But I'm telling you, man, first of all, I got to say this. Most Americans think they grew up poor. I don't care how close to the middle class they was, they think they grew up poor because somebody was way better than them and they couldn't get every little thing that they wanted. And some of them got everything they wanted at the expense of their family. But I grew up in poverty, grew up around real poverty. But I grew up, I grew up in that part of Chicago that was very overcrowded. I grew up around the Robert Taylor homes, real close to it, always around it. And if you're from that part of South Side, the Robert Taylor homes, it's almost like our downtown. You got them big old buildings, and you can see them from anywhere on that part of the South Side. If you look in that direction, you see them. They're the high rise, the tallest buildings around there, and they go for miles, literally miles of project buildings, and very overcrowded and underserved. We had to police ourselves because the police weren't showing up. And there were certain years that the police were not coming, certain years and certain events that the police and the firefighters were just not coming past dark. They just weren't doing it. It was pointless in their eyes. And they were too outnumbered. I seen things, lots of things. That was the type of thing, 4th of July, you're a little boy, they make you lay in the bathtub. They're going to start shooting for New Year's, lay in the bathtub. Because a lot of these people shooting, they're dumb. They're dumb. They're untrained. They're uncouth. They think they're gods of the neighborhood. They think their life is the only life that matters. And not just that, but there's extreme ignorance. You don't think if you're shooting this way what's that bullet going to hit? You don't think so. There was lots of accidental shootings and murders. Donald Trump talks about how great things were in my childhood. He's full of it. Chicago highest murders were 1980 and 1990. There were thousands of murders those years. And those years, the 80s, crazy. It's hard for me to not curse out somebody that says how good the 80s were. The stuff I saw as a kid makes me wish that those people come back reincarnated and they have to live what I lived. If you say that you want to go back to any time before the 21st century, it's almost 2025. We're almost a quarter into the century. No major wars. Do you realize what was going on in the 1920s? You don't. You don't. The 1920s were horrific. The 1930s were horrific. The 1940s, horrific. The 1950s, horrific. A lot of this is ignorance. People, we just don't know history like that as Americans. We don't know our history. And we make up our history. We know more made-up history than we know actual history. You get to talking to people and you hear them say things and you're like, where do you get that from? It's not true. It's not true. Where did you get that? Then they'll say, do research. Where? I'm on the spectrum. I'm autistic. It's way more fun for me to study history and to play with numbers. Sometimes I just play with numbers in my head. I was talking to somebody about relationships, and it's like, man, I like numbers too much to like a person. You know, I've had relationships, but it's hard to date when you're autistic. And I wouldn't be surprised if the women I've had children with, I wouldn't be surprised if they're also autistic, but we're undiagnosed. Because again, we come from underserved communities. The poverty, again, everybody thinks they grew up poor. But then you take them around poverty and they'll literally throw up a minute in a place that, you can't imagine. And we got all these red pill people, these red pill know-it-alls. They figured out human nature. And they're going to tell you, I'm going to tell you about black this and that. They couldn't even tell you about the history of blackness where they're from. Yet alone, they could speak for Chicago and Detroit and New York and Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina. 1970 Chicago was nothing like 1970 Mississippi. But they both was going through it. They both had their struggles. Totally different type of black people. And it's absolutely racist to say anything different. But anyway, I got to get to the story. I will wrap it up. Stone Academy was a great public school. It was a great magnet school. But for fourth grade, my mom was always trying to move us out the hood, always trying to move us further and further away from poverty. And she did great, baby step by baby step, with the little help that we had, which was not much help. My mom couldn't call family members. She grew up in a foster home. Her mother was unfit to raise her, so her mother was unfit to watch us. And we tried. There's stories of my grandma. My grandma got shock therapy. My grandmother got impregnated by her doctor when she was 14. She tells the story in some of the videos I recorded of her. And I have to listen to these fools. My grandma got forcefully sent to a mental institution at 14. And the same psychiatrist who was treating her and who was basically the god of her life, he decided what meal she ate that day, if she could get a pen to write a letter, if she could get visits from her own mother. He impregnated her. And nobody cared. Nobody did anything. The only thing they did to her was shock her. The only thing they did to her was, of course, they took the baby and they shocked her. And my grandmother was black, as a black woman come, but she was Catholic. There were black Catholics. You listen to I got into an argument with somebody earlier today who was talking about the Nation of Islam and how all black people that he know love Minister Farrakhan. I grew up in Chicago. I went to school. There were times because I moved around a lot. There were times in my life I went down the street. I went to school right down the street from Farrakhan. Farrakhan ain't never was the most popular minister in any area that he ever preached in I saw in Chicago. Most black people did not like Farrakhan. So again, I hear these people on the internet, are they trolls? I asked the dude I got into this argument earlier, I said, where do you get this from? That most black people love Farrakhan. Where do you get this from? Most black Christians love and trust Farrakhan? COG, Church of God in Christ, those Kojic, they love him. Black Methodists, they love and trust Farrakhan. Black Catholics, they love and trust Farrakhan. I traveled around this country. Most black people, when I tell them I went to an all-black Catholic school, they're like, there's no such thing. Not only did I go to an all-black Catholic school, my brother went to another all-black Catholic school in Chicago, both on the South Side. And I'm in the South now, Methodists, Protestants, other, Seventh-day Adventists. All these religions I named, they dwarf the Nation of Islam. But I run across these people online all the time that are like, but the guy didn't answer me because I asked him, where? You say you know all these black people. I don't believe you're a real black person talking like this. You're a black person and you say all the black people you know love Farrakhan. Where? What city? What black city you live in where most black people are down with the NOI? Black Muslims, and not just black Muslims, but NOI? Most black Muslims don't mess with Farrakhan and NOI and FOI. They don't trust them. They don't deal with them. Most black Muslims will tell you that is a cult. Most black Christians will tell you that is a cult. That is one of the smallest religions. They're about the size of black Hebrew Israelites, and most black people don't know what the hell a black Hebrew Israelite is. Anyway, for fourth grade, my mom was managed to send me to a very expensive public school. She was working there. And so I went to a very expensive public school. Now, again, like I mentioned, I was autistic. And now I'm going to this private school. And I had great therapists at my magnet school, but I had really good therapists and counselors and psychiatrists at this other school that could recognize. And they saw that, there's something up with this kid. And they probably figured, hey, man, this boy is definitely undiagnosed autistic. So anyway, my teacher, she introduced me. She made me fall in love with, I was falling out of love with math, and I always loved math, but she helped me fall back in love with math. And she helped me fall in love with nonfiction reading. And in particular, she recommended, I don't know what it was about her, I don't know what snapped in her head, but she was like, I really think you'll like Ulysses S. Grant. And she gave me a biography of Ulysses S. Grant, and I read it. And in fourth grade, I think I was about 10 years old, I read that book, and I was like, wow, there are Americans like that, not just Americans like that, but there are white Americans like that are willing to sacrifice every single inch of themselves. The thing about Lincoln, you could argue about Lincoln. Lincoln is so mythologized that people get to say some crazy stuff about Lincoln. There's so many there's probably more made up stories about Lincoln. He's like mythical. So you hear crazy things exaggerating how great he was. You hear crazy things demonizing him, anglicizing him, demonizing him. Ulysses S. Grant was different. He lived a long time, and people studied him because he's considered one of the greatest generals that has ever lived in the history of humanity. Definitely the greatest general that America ever had. He somehow figured out how to win the war when they were going to lose. They were going to lose, especially when you think about what the Civil War was about and what the Union would have had to accomplish. It was amazing. All the rebels had to do was become a free nation. The Union had to get that nation back and then occupy them and then, reconcile with them. It's a big task. General Grant had to beat these people and beat them in a way that they didn't just hate us forever, even though the Klan was born. But anyway, I read about Grant in fourth grade, and probably the greatest American hero in my mind ever since. So severely and so seriously that, if I'm arguing with somebody about Grant, especially somebody that's extreme, like if somebody was trying to argue with me to my face that Trump was better than Grant, I would have to stop the conversation and be like, hey, man, come on, I can't do this, man. I can't do this. I can't have you compare Donald Trump, somebody else I studied my whole life. I read his books as a young man, and I know what kind of dude he was. He's not like them. He should not be compared to America's greatest soldiers and heroes. He's not that. He shouldn't be compared to Patton. He shouldn't be compared to Grant. He shouldn't be even John McCain. The things he said about John McCain way back then. The things he said on that bus. The things he keeps saying. People say, I love him because he's telling the truth. So he was telling the truth when he was dissing John McCain. He was telling the truth when he was locker room talking on the back of that bus about just grabbing women, taking advantage of the fact that they're starstruck and enamored with him. So he's going to assault them. And it's going to be our president. He was telling the truth when he saying all that sexual stuff about his daughter. He's telling the truth when he was laughing and joking with Howard Stern about his daughter being a piece of ass and about going in the locker room looking at children in the Miss Teen USA pageants or whatever pageant he owned that was for little girls, children. He's walking in the locker room and these girls are changing. And he's bragging about getting to check them out with Howard Stern. And this is the conservative party? It's disgusting. It's disgusting. If you sit and think about it for a second, it's disgusting and you should be disgusted. This is not who we're supposed to be as this country. Epstein? People talk about Epstein. So quick to talk about Epstein and Clinton. Clinton and Epstein weren't close as Trump and Epstein. We know that Trump and Epstein partied together. There's video footage of them partying together. But you excuse it. MAGA excuse. He's telling the truth. You love him because he's telling the truth. So he's telling the truth when he says he wants to execute people for drug dealing? What does, and that's so vague the way he says it. Teenagers selling weed? Teenagers selling, single mothers selling, like what does this mean, executing drug dealers? We have millions of people who have been convicted of possession of drugs. And the possession of drugs charge could turn into distribution of drugs just like that. They trump that charge up all the time. All the time. And like I say, countless cases of cops getting caught planting drugs on innocent children. I've experienced it. I've seen it. Since, again, the 80s, the 90s. It's never stopped. Even with cameras. They just caught somebody recently. He knew his body cam was on, but he was trying to do it where the camera wouldn't see it. But they still caught him because there were other cameras. Recently. They're still doing it. Cops are still planting drugs on people knowing that they're wearing body cams. Knowing that there's cameras in the vehicles. And Donald Trump, again, America's Hitler. Talking about how he's getting railroaded by the justice system. Could you imagine how people could get railroaded for that? How easy. I drive Uber for a living. How easy would it be to plant drugs on a guy like me? Got passengers back there. I do, you know, those rides add up. We could do thousands of rides really quickly. You can't check all the crooks and crevices after every Uber ride. And he said it more than once. And a lot of times you'll be talking to a MAGA person and you'll ask him that. So you love him because he tells the truth? So you agree with him that we should start executing drug dealers? We don't even execute killers in most states, which is good because DNA has proved that many, many men have been on death row for crimes that they didn't even know anything about. Look into the Innocence Project. So I'm not even really talking to MAGA. I am talking to MAGA, wake up people, but I'm talking to Republicans that haven't become MAGA. It's going to be hard to vote for Kamala Harris. Like I say, I'm mostly a religious conservative. So this is going to be, I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. The last time I voted, I've never even voted for Obama. And I made videos, don't vote for Obama just because he's black. Read his book. Read his book. If you agree with him, go ahead. But don't just listen to what the narrative. Obama wrote 2 books. 2 kind of, sort of, semi-autobiographical books. Nobody read them, though. I mean, he sold millions of copies. It was a bestseller, but most people who were gung-ho for him didn't read them. Just like most of these MAGA people. They haven't read Project 2025, which, you know, the Democrats keep saying you need to read that, blah, blah, blah. As a conservative, that's not upsetting to us too much, especially if we don't look into the legal details and we don't understand the law deeply. You know, we don't understand what some of that stuff means. And some of the stuff, we do understand what it means. Do you know how many people? There's a lot of people that wishes that pornography was illegal. It should be. It definitely shouldn't be as legal as it is today. It definitely shouldn't be considered free speech. That's horrendous. Everybody, I remember, what was that? QAnon. The QAnon was talking about Donald Trump was going to clean up all these child molesters and all this stuff in the Congress and the Senate. Well, what happened, Q? Donald Trump didn't go after them. That's not what his Justice Department focused on at all. Not at all. What happened to that Q stuff? Trump didn't free Hoover. Trump didn't free Hoover. Trump pardoned over 100 people. They were all symbolic as hell. They were all things that wouldn't have no consequences. He gave out pardons to rappers who didn't even need pardons. Rappers who had already served their time. Bad ideas. Some of it was bad ideas. He gave Lil Wayne a pardon. Lil Wayne had been out of prison for years. Jail, prison, really jail. Lil Wayne really went to jail. He pardoned Kodak Black. And Kodak Black messed up again because that young man needed some more time in there. And this is coming from a brother that went to prison. And that's one thing too. A lot of people would judge me and be like, "Oh, you an ex-convict?" Big difference between me and Trump. One, I was juvenile delinquent. I caught that case when I was 18. And I learned from that case. I caught a robbery case. I never committed a robbery again. I don't rob people now. I learned my lesson. Trump was convicted of this bribery. He definitely didn't learn his lesson. As a matter of fact, he won't even admit that he's guilty of anything. Only reason I'm going down is because I'm a popular. They just player hating. You buy it, you lap it up. But again, the last message to this, the real message of this video is to Republicans who still have their senses, who see this stuff, and they're worried about it. And they're just going to not vote. Or maybe vote Republican because just that's what we do. And we feel like voting Republican, voting against the Democrats. Look at anything I've ever put online. This YouTube channel has been around since 2006. Before January 6th, if I say anything about Trump, it's more than likely nice. Even if I'm criticizing him, most of the videos going to probably be giving him praise because it's like Obama did push the country way too far to the left. And he didn't listen to the right at all. Just screw you. Further. I'm going to make the people who vote for me happy. And the people who didn't vote for me, screw them because they're crazy. They're crazy if they're not for gay marriage. Just smack us in the face with that and then shove it down our throat. Gay time story hour, drag queen story hour. If you object to that, you're a homophobe, transphobe, all this other stuff. If it is a phobia, why would you mock me for a mental illness? A phobia is a mental illness. If it is just out of fear. But there's, by just dismissing it like that, you ignore all the reasonable arguments. So just as guilty as the right is, the left is not as guilty. Obama definitely wasn't as outrageous. As somebody who watched Canada and Obama and said, I can't vote for this dude. Canada and Obama was crazy. President Obama, he didn't do a lot of things that I was terrified he would do as he was running. I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay on day one because war is bad. War is not the answer. Sounded like a freaking kid the way he talked about the war. But when he became commander-in-chief, he executed the war properly. As good as you can expect, better than you can expect, especially if you're on the right. And you're not no freaking idiot that's like, hey man, let's end war. Let's just throw all of our nukes in the war. Let's just throw all of our nukes in the ocean and get rid of our military. Stop military spending, the industrial military complex. That's so stupid of the left. If we just get rid of all of our nukes, then what's going to happen? If we just stop having the strongest military in the world, then what's going to happen? The other countries are going to be like, America did it. Let's get rid of our nukes too. Idiots. I get the anti-war sentiment, but let's not be 4-year-old girls. I don't eat chicken nuggets because they're made out of animals. Look, let's not be ridiculous with it. Everybody should stop eating meat tomorrow because meat is murder. That's just as ridiculous. If you're on the left and you're looking at me like, oh, you're a killer. You kill babies? So yes, we are, those of us on the right. Abortion isn't just about women's rights. It's not just about women's rights. It's about more than that. It's about this hedonistic lifestyle that Americans have. Go out every weekend, get drunk, and woohoo! They don't tell a man what to do with his body. Bull crap. If I get a woman